Hello, everyone, and welcome to week three. Today, we're going to be looking at research problems, questions, and hypotheses. A research problem is an area of concern in which there's a gap in knowledge that's needed for practice. And so, in essence, something that you've discovered in your practice, or something that you've read in the literature um, on any particular topic that still has um, unresolved issues. And those issues are significant and they're usually current and important for the profession. So let me give you an example. Let's say that we were looking at disability services on campus, okay? And we wanted to see if professionals that are providing those services are people that have background or training in either counseling or in rehabilitation counseling specifically. Uh, if we wanted to go about looking at that, um, we would focus on um, why that is something that's important. Why do we need to look at a topic like that? Why do we need to know if the people that are providing services in disabilities that are providing services to students in university disability services are people that have training either or have backgrounds either in special ed or in rehabilitation counseling. And the need for that is because we're having a lot of students with disabilities, some of which are undisclosed. We're also having veterans that are coming in. We're also having people from minority backgrounds that either through have not have access to disability services. And so there is a need for something like that. And so whatever topic that you're going to be looking at, you have to look at it starting with the research problem, which is the gap in knowledge that you want to address. The next thing that we'll be focusing on in this lecture is what we call the research question. And the research question is the broad overall question that you want to answer. What is that thing that is out there that we don't know about, but what is that thing specifically? And so the research um, question is usually like a statement of the specific query that you want to answer. And so that would often like detail the problem statement. And the problem statement is the problem that you've identified or the gap in knowledge that you've identified that you will put in a statement format, and the research questions often derive from that problem statement. And so the research questions bring focus to your problem statement and it helps to guide the data collection and the data analysis. So let's say, hypothetically, like the example that I gave about looking at disability services on campus, we wanted to see if the professionals that provide disability services on campus are people that have the right qualifications, experience, or expertise, etc. Then we would have to start with developing the research problem and then um, also asking specific questions. And so, an example of a question for that would be do university disability services have do university disability services have qualified or competent um, professionals that provide these services? And the second question that we could derive from that also would be that what is the educational qualification or the background of the people that provide services in these offices? Um, and another question that we could also look at is to what extent does having a degree, let's say in special ed, um, rehabilitation, counseling, uh, a related field, um, assist these individuals to provide better services for students with disabilities. And so the research question, just to reiterate, is something that's a statement of the specific query that the researcher, that's you, want to answer, and it kind of like details the problem statement. It also focuses on the problem statement and guides data collection and analysis. The research question also sets the context for your study. So when we talk about context, we're talking about where your study is taking place. For example, in the topic that I talked about just a few minutes ago, which is about disability services that are provided on campus and the qualifications of those providing those services. The context for that study would be a university environment, specifically the disability services offices. We want to know the qualifications of those people. Do they have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree? What are their experiences? What educational qualifications do they have? Do they have any experience that's related to working with disabilities in the past? And so the context that we're looking at is the place that the study is taking place and what the study is focusing on. And so, how do we generate the research questions that we want to study? Sometimes we just come about these questions by observing others. Um, Everything that we see around us in the environment is a material for um, creating a research topic. And so when you see something, let's say hypothetically in the city of Owensville in the summer, there is a spike in crime rate. Uh, that is something that could interest you as a researcher and say, uh, why is it that in the summer there is more crime compared to the fall or the spring season? Is there a correlation between the two? Is there a correlation between the weather and people's behavior? Is there a correlation between um, um, the seasons and how people behave in terms of crime? And so, just by observing people's behavior, another example that I could give you is just by looking at your classroom, looking at the door. Think about how many fingerprints you would find on the door on a day, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. That could tell you the amount of people that go into a particular classroom and the amount of people that may have taken classes there in a day or in a week. And so just by observing people, we could come up with the questions. Another thing could be like with application of new technology. Um, when we want to apply certain technology, and when we say technology, we're talking about the hardware and the software. So, in terms of the knowledge itself. So, if there was a new principle that was created, or if there's a new theory that is created in the field of counseling or in psychology, and we want to apply that, we may want to test if that actually works, if that is something that would work across population. And how does that work? Uh, that's a way that we could generate a research question. Could Another way could be when we build on experiences. So we discover some type of knowledge, and so we want to expand on that. That could be a way that we could generate the question. Another way could be in journals. When you go through some type of scientific communication, either in print form or in electronic form, and then that would arouse your curiosity and you would ask questions, um, further questions about what you've observed. Um, and so the research question is something that helps us in that way. Um, and so some characteristics of good research question is that one, um, the research question should be feasible. feasible in terms of whatever study you're trying to address. What are the number of subjects that you would have? Subjects in terms of like the number of participants or the number of observations that you would have. Is it something that is feasible to do? Let's say hypothetically you want to look at the number of HIV cases um, in the African American population in the state of Alabama. Well, that is something that is um, feasible to some extent, but that will require you to go around the entire state of Alabama just to get that information. But if you narrow that down to, let's say, the city of Huntsville or to Montgomery or Birmingham, that would be much easier for you to do. Another thing is, do you have adequate technical expertise? This is something that's very important. Whatever you're looking at should be an area in which you have some type of knowledge, such that when you seek out information, you'll be able to say, okay, look, this is that, and you'll be able to provide some, have some type of insight into what you're looking at. Um, Good research questions also are those that are affordable in terms of time and money, so that when you start off looking at them, you should be able to get such studies completed in a reasonable amount of time. Another thing is the topic interesting? Is it something that you would be enthusiastic about and want to um, engage yourself in? Is it novel in the sense that is it new to the field? If your research does not add any knowledge to what you're looking at, then it doesn't provide much value, because there's a ton of research that's already done out there. Another thing could be in terms of ethics. Uh, would your study create any kind of harm to the subjects? Uh, will it breach any kind of confidentiality or any kind of existing laws that are out there? And how relevant is your study in terms of contributing to the existing body of knowledge? Uh, and so those are things that you need to think about before you engage in your study. Um, the last thing that we'll look at this week is hypothesis. An hypothesis is basically a prediction that we make about the relationship about among two or more variables. Um, and what hypothesis does for us is to help us to make some type of guess about the relationships that could potentially exist. Let's say that in the previous example that um, I was giving, the previous one that talked about, uh, professionals in the disability services. If we wanted to say, is there a relationship between the educational qualification or background of the person and your ability to provide services? Uh, we could state that um, in what we call an hypothesis, where we're trying to make some type of prediction. We could say that there is a positive relationship uh, in the um, relationship between the qualifications of uh, disability professionals and the service outcomes that they could potentially have. And so, um, an hypothesis just simply suggests a relationship or the lack thereof between or among variables. It helps to predict causes and the relationships prior to testing. And these should be developed before you collect actual data, so that it will. Um, so after you collect the data, then you could test if there's a relationship um, in the variables that you're looking at. Uh, this is an example of a research question, an hypothesis that I have in the slide. The research question is that Is a happy worker a productive worker? And